Good day, I am Adrian Atkinson and this is your JIS News for Wednesday, October 4, 2023. The Ministry of Health and Wellness has allocated over $300 million to carry out its dengue outbreak mitigation plan. The 5 areas include search and destroy operations, clinical and workforce management, surveillance, and public education. Portfolio Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton gave the update earlier today at a post-cabinet press briefing. The lion's share of $160 million has been allocated to the National Works Agency for major drain cleaning in high-risk communities. $96 million will support mitigation works by the municipal corporations through the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development.
It's important because our municipal authorities, first of all, are part of the public health response at the parish level. Secondly, they have an infrastructure through councillors, elected representatives, as well as the administrative representative, who are able to provide micro-management support in communities. So it's very important because, as I said, that's where the breeding sites are.
The remaining $75 million will be used by the National Solid Waste Management Authority to remove bulky waste across communities, which are primary breeding sites for the Aedes aegypti mosquito.
They have been mobilized in addition to what they do normally to provide that. So when you combine the municipal authorities, the National Works Agency, National Solid Waste, plus what Ministry of Health will do with its team in the field, what you get, and the public education, what you get is a overarching, holistic approach.
Meanwhile, the number of presumed suspected and confirmed dengue cases has increased to 1,117, passing the epidemic threshold for July, August and September. Minister of Health and Wellness Dr. Christopher Tufton gave the update during yesterday's sitting of Parliament, saying that the data was as of September 29. He said the National Surveillance Unit statistics show that 160 are confirmed dengue cases, with 158 being the serotype 2 strain of the virus. There was also one serotype 3 and one serotype 4 strain of the dengue virus.
The 15 to 14-year-old age cohort continues to be the most affected. So younger persons. And the explanation for that, Madam Speaker, is that this is the population that is least exposed to this particular strain. Just for public education purposes, there are 4 strains, and the type 2 strain we haven't seen since 2010. So the older population would have been exposed, the younger not so, and they become therefore the most vulnerable because it is a novel strain for them.
Dr. Christopher Tufton says so far only one of the 6 deaths being investigated has been confirmed to be dengue related. 5
of those deaths have now been classified. Regrettably, Madam Speaker, 1 death was due to dengue. Of the 5, 3 were classified as suspected dengue-related deaths, and 1 was not a dengue-related death. The 6th death remains under investigation.
Meanwhile, the health minister is urging parents to exercise vigilance with children and teens and other vulnerable groups, including the elderly and persons with compromised immune systems.
It is important, colleagues, Madam Speaker, for persons experiencing fever, vomiting, severe abdominal pain, bleeding under the skin, feeling very weak or getting confused, to seek immediate medical attention.
In other news, the Jamaica Constabulary Force, JCF, is reporting a 13% reduction in major crimes for the period January to September this year. This includes a 12% reduction in murders, 9% less shootings, and 18% decrease in rape. There's also a 17% decline in robberies and a 13% dip in break-ins. The figures were disclosed at the JCF's monthly press briefing on Tuesday. Commissioner of Police Major General Anthony Anderson says interpersonal violence accounts for 21% of total homicides, while 66% was attributed to gang-related murders.
This is a shift from the 70+% attributable to gangs as our counter-gang measures take effect.
The Commissioner says while illegal guns are the weapon of choice for criminals, accounting for 84% of killings, efforts by the police have resulted in the seizure of 560 firearms. Police Commissioner Anderson says the force remains resolute in maintaining law and order.
To continue our efforts against gangs and violent criminal organizations and end the year with reductions in all major crimes. We are looking forward to even greater collaboration and assistance from our local law enforcement partners, the JDF, Customs, MOCA, and others, as we close the year and move into next year. Most importantly, we are anticipating continued public support for our force.
Significant work is being done to facilitate the enactment of legislation to prevent children who are deemed uncontrollable from being placed in correctional institutions. Having passed in the Senate on Friday without amendments, the Child Care and Protection Amendment Act will now be gazetted. Leader of Government Business in the Senate, Senator Commendation Johnson-Smith, says the legal framework now requires a more structural, therapeutic and psychological approach to dealing with this category of children. She says the opening of the Child Protection and Family Services Agency CPFSA State-of-the-Art Therapeutic Center in July this year is one of the targeted proactive measures.
To create this system, which won't now just be conceptual, it will be that there is now a treatment facility with staff, with the tools that are needed for children. We know that there are a whole slate of disorders that exist on a spectrum, Mr. President, that have to be dealt with.
Senator Johnson-Smith says adequate staffing at childcare agencies and increasing the compensation package for social workers are also part of the process.
So this is it's time-intensive work, and staffing has always been an issue on these social issues. So we recognize that this has not been optimal, but it is being enhanced and staff is being expanded and improved. And I also want to just mention that the improvement in the salaries of our social workers, which has doubled, or is it more than doubled, the compensation offered to social workers, it will now incentivize more people to go into training as social workers, because this was one of the difficulties, insufficient persons going into social work.
According to Senator Johnson-Smith, the Department of Correctional Services in 2012 reported that the population of children in such institution was over 400. However, efforts by the Ministries of Education and Youth, Justice and National Security have reduced the figure to 260 as of July this year. Senator Johnson-Smith says examination of individual cases will lead to no child being placed in lockups. The Ministry of National Security says it is in the process of establishing its first Live Good Wellness Centre in St. James. The Live Good initiative was introduced in 2019 as a way for persons to foster a culture of civility and respect for each other. It's also an anti-violence campaign that urges persons to stand against anything that violates good living and all forms of crime and criminal activity. National Security Minister Dr. Horace Chang says the building to house the Live Good Wellness Centre is being rehabilitated in partnership with the private sector. In addition, the Ministry of Finance has approved a budget for a staff of 10 to be employed through the Ministry of Health.
2 clinical psychologists, 2 clinical psychologists, psychiatric aides, psychiatric nurse, along with the required supporting staff in that. And the first of a model of centers that will be designed to provide professional counseling at all levels, including our young people in schools and community clubs across the island.
Minister Chang was addressing the House of Representatives recently. He says the Live Good Wellness Centre is part of the new direction of social intervention to provide the appropriate health care and education to at-risk youth. And finally, Prime Minister Andrew Holness has acknowledged the goodwill of 5 students from the B.B. Coke High School in St. Elizabeth for their valiant effort to save the life of their schoolmate. The grade 8 student was beaten to a state of unconsciousness by an 11th grader after stepping on his shoe. A viral video shows the 5 students walking with the injured schoolmate all the way to the hospital for medical attention. The student remains hospitalized. Prime Minister Holness and Minister of Education Favour Williams met with the young men at his office yesterday and presented the citation along with laptops. Mr. Holness commended the boys' action, saying it brings hope.
What we saw being displayed is a reaffirmation that the core of our society is still good, and that there are people, young people in our society, without prompting, that will act in the interest of their fellow men.
Prime Minister Holness says too often persons are quick to record incidents on cell phones rather than to render assistance.
And when we see this, as we are entering into the celebration of our heroes in this month, when we see this, we must acknowledge it, we must praise it, and in particularly in our young men, we must encourage it. I am not here proposing to say reward, because this must be done without any contemplation of a reward. But that it has happened, and that we are grateful that it has happened, that Jahim is grateful, that Jahim's survival today could be tied to the actions of these young men, that in acknowledging it, we also give tokens that they can have to recall this moment and to enlist them as ambassadors for good and ambassadors of positive behavior.
And that's it for JIS News Today. I'm Adrian Atkinson. Thank you so much for watching.